Hey guys, you happy with that? Is that a good spot?
Yep, that's good.
That's cool.
Yep.
Am I looking here?
Yep.
Yep. So we're talking. Is that on? Hello? Can you hear me? My name's Massey, and this is my story.
So you mentioned that when you were young, like life was very different to like.
Yeah, the poverty was real, baby.
It was different. So like, what is a good life to you right now?
That's an interesting question, and I think the answer to that definitely changes as we change. You know, when you're young, it's very much about, you know, things, possessions and those types of things, and oh, you know, I really want this and I want that. But, you know, a good life now, like I'm 46 years old, you know, a good life is like you want to be healthy. Good health means all of your hopes, dreams and desires come within reach. As you get older, one of the key limiters to accomplishing things becomes the physical limits that come into place because of your health. You know, so especially, look, I'm Polynesian, you know, the Holy Trinity for most Māoris and Pollies is they get gout, they get their high blood pressure, their cholesterol, diabetes, you know, and all of that's because of lifestyle. Sleep is really, really important. Having a great night's sleep is just enabled by good nutrition and a healthy, active lifestyle. If you can do that, then everything else that you want to do professionally and personally becomes possible. Whereas if as soon as your physical health becomes an issue, you can't really do the things that you want to do. It becomes very limited because you become limited because of your health. Especially as you get, you know, 40s, 50s, like you're starting to cash in all the health checks. So health is really important, especially around my age. And then what should be happening, you're also starting to take advantage of the wise decisions that you made in your, you know, 20s, 30s and early 40s around asset acquisition. You know, so a really good life is, for me, is, you know, a good flex as your wife gets what she wants. For me, it's definitely the two triggers, like at this point in my life, is definitely my wife. I'm intensity, she's consistency. So I'm like, raw, all in for a short period. You get a burst out of me, right? Which is amazing, but it's very inconsistent. Whereas she's day in, day out, you know, alarm goes off, up, go to the gym, train every day, rain, hail or shine, just get it done. And then the other big one influences is Elijah, my son. And so that was a huge precursor for me going, you know what? I'm going to drop weight. I'm going to get my whole act together. And just you need inspiration. And so I think when our children are young, we inspire them. But I think as they get older, they start to inspire us. So I draw a lot of inspiration from that. And, you know, they train really hard. They're super fit. They can do phenomenal things. So, you know, Dad's got to keep up, yo. You know, I've got a competitive edge. So, you know, that's a positive thing. So seeing those two make their health a priority has had a really positive impact on me. And then look, man, you look good, you feel good. You know, you look good, you feel good. You want to get out, you want to do things, and you don't shy away from, you know, I've been overweight. I've been 135 kilos and I've been the weight I am now. And trust me, it's much better to be healthy. Every day of the week, take that.
In your life, has there ever been a monumental, uncomfortable situation that you were put in that was really hard for you, but then it has really helped you grow as a person, as a business owner, as a father, as a husband? Any experiences in that?
Yeah, there's a few. You know, there's a few that you know, like I said, I'm 46, so you're going to go through some, it ain't all champagne and roses, that's for sure. You know what I mean? And there's going to be some lessons along the way, and you're going to have to do a couple of very difficult things. But you grow through it. You know, you really do grow through it. So, you know, I think in the personal sphere of our lives, one of the most difficult things that we went through as a family was when we got MJ's autism diagnosis. So MJ was 3. I was working in the city for a company called GDS, an English company, and MJ had been non-verbal. He was 3, but he was non-verbal, and he was quite unruly, wild, I don't know what you call it. He'd been put into preschool. and it just the development curve wasn't in line with everything else that was going on, and so they were kind of flagging. They're like, something's not right. Maybe it's his hearing, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. So that pushed Paula to she'd done a number of hearing tests, and she'd done a number of things, and then finally she had to go and see this one doctor, and that was to just, I don't know, diagnose him to see what the issue was. It was at Fairfield Hospital. She had an appointment there. She went to that, and in that appointment, after that appointment, she's called me. I worked at GDS. It was in Grosvenor Place in the city, which is right down the Circular Quay end of George Street. And there's a courtyard just behind it with a food court. And so we were in there eating, and one of the boys come down and grabbed me and said, "Hey, your wife's on the phone. I think there's something wrong." And so went upstairs, jumped on the phone. I walked in. Only the boss was there because the rest of the boys are down. So I jumped on the phone, and that's where Paula told me. She's like, "Oh, MJ's autistic. We've just got a diagnosis, and we've just been told MJ's autistic." And when she said that, it's like, she's crying on the phone. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I kind of got off the phone. I said, okay, well, I'll come home. And I kind of just sat back in my chair, hung up the phone, and then, looked at the boss, and I just said to him, I've got to go. He's like, man, go. Because when they picked up the phone, she was obviously crying on the phone when she rung. And that's why the boys come to get me. But dealing with that, for us, we didn't know what that meant. We didn't know what it was. It was extremely challenging for us. So that happened on a Wednesday. Went home. I remember, calling the family, speaking to my brother and my mum and telling them, and that week was pretty full on. So that happened on the Wednesday. The Thursday, parents look for answers. When something's happening and you don't understand what it is, you just look for answers. So we started reading everything. You're online, you're doing your Google searches. This is pre-AI, so you just had to look around for stuff. And we found like a school for children with autism, and we went there the next day. We actually sat with the principal, and he could see that we were physically distraught. And Paula, we're just extremely vulnerable and extremely tearful and highly emotional. And the other kids are there, and they're autistic, and we're looking at it and we're going, like, is that MJ? Is that what MJ is going to be like? And it was full on. It was crazy. Our emotion was very raw. We were still trying to process. Like, that's a word that people use a lot now. I'm not processing. Yeah, that wasn't really a word back then, so you don't know what's happening. You're just trying to roll with the punches, so to speak. But that was the next day. So Wednesday, Thursday we did that, and then on the Sunday it was actually my nephew's christening. It was his name blessing, and so there was after that everyone went out. Everyone goes back to the house for the family, and so we're at my cousin's place. And that was the first time we saw all the families after that. We had a really good chat with the family. That was cool. And then we went home, and we'd been robbed. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. So we got MJ's diagnosis on the Wednesday. We got robbed on the Sunday. And it was just like, bro, are you for real? And we pulled up, and where we were, the house we were in, there was a gate at the top of the road, and that was always closed. And we'd pull up, we'd open it, and then drive the car in. And we pulled up, that gate was open, and we've just, well, that's weird. You drive down, and the front door was open. You're like, okay, what's going on here? And we went inside, and we've been robbed. And it was funny because we rung family and my mum and that, and everyone was still at my cousin's place. They were awesome. So everyone come over. They were like, "What, you got robbed?" Everyone's rocked up. Oh, that was crazy. It was funny though, because we weren't active at church in any real meaningful way. We didn't go to church at all. And when my uncle come over, he was like, do you want a blessing? And that was probably the first time that I had a priesthood blessing, like pretty much ever. And so that kind of brought the Lord back into our life. And and from there I kind of made decisions that I was going to go back to church, and so I made a priority. And for mine and MJ's relationship, because when MJ was born, I worked really long hours. I didn't really see him. I was at work most days, and so what that means is you leave work when he's asleep and you get home when he's asleep. And so that was most days. And then there'd be days when you're there and he's like, who's this guy? Why is this guy in my house? Why is this guy sitting by my mum? You know, and that's what sacrifice looks like. You know, you're a young man, you've got a young family, and your number one priority, everything in your being says, you know, I need to provide for my family. And so that means super long hours. You know, professionally, it looks amazing. You know, at the time I was working in the car yard, and within 3 months I got a promotion. 8 months later I got another promotion. Top sold 11 out of 12 months. But that first 2 years working there was monster hours, huge professional development, huge personal development, but major sacrifice with my family. So from a difficulty perspective and dealing with hard things, I think that's right up there. But it's also the things that, you know, bless us the most, because that changed everything. You know, it changed everything. I decided to go back to church, and I decided to make that the primary decision-making process. Whenever I was going to do something, I'd run everything through the filter of, you know, is this the right thing for me to be doing? And I'd seek counsel from the Lord, and, you know, that's really blessed our family. And that pathway to get to do that, was MJ's diagnosis. But also as a father, that helped me to develop. I parented MJ very different after that. And what I understood was, when you're autistic, he was nonverbal. So you've got low communication, which just doesn't really understand what's going on. And then they talk about challenging behaviours, which could be a tantrum, could be any number of ways that shows up. MJ was very physical. So for me, I learned that, you know, getting angry at MJ for him having challenging behaviours would be the equivalent of getting angry at your son if he was blind and being angry at him for not being able to see. So then my rule with him was, like, I would never ever lose my patience with MJ. That come in, like, patience was huge with MJ, and I just never lost my patience with him after that, and just always took time with him. But I still worked monster hours. Wasn't really allowed. So Sunday became the day where me and him bonded. It was our time together. We'd go to church together. We'd spend time together. And it was just me and him. So it was also our time bonding, you know, away from mum, just me and him bonding, you know. And in that sphere, you know, we grew really close together, you know, doing at church. So yeah, that was challenging, huge, but the outflow of positive impacts from that, you know, it's still present in our family today. It's huge. You don't know it at the time. It just feels like, oh, why is this happening to me? This is the thing. But, you know, looking back, like what we got from that, you know, now as a family, yeah, #blessed.
In your life right now, what are 3 things that matter the most to you?
You know, it's faith, it's family, and it's finances. You know, so faith is, you know, faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, but also having the courage, you know, to forgive yourself when you get things wrong. You know, when you understand the gospel of Jesus Christ, the deal is, well, we ain't perfect. You know what I mean? That's the deal. The deal is we're going to get it wrong. We're going to make mistakes. We're probably going to let down the people that we love, including ourselves, and we're going to disappoint ourselves. We're going to make commitments that we're not going to keep. But faith teaches us that, you know, the Lord says, yeah, but you can repent. You know, as long as you're heading this direction, you might go this way or that way from time to time, you can get back on track. You know, and we learn about, you know, forgiveness. And so learning the way that the Lord forgives us, then it enables us to be able to forgive ourselves when we make big mistakes. But more importantly, something you can turn to in times of challenges and trials, and, you know, when you're losing yourself, which happens in life, you know, from time to time we start to lose ourselves and we can be making bad decisions or whatever it is. You know, the gospel is what brings us back to center. So yeah, faith is really important, and it also gives our children a bedrock, gives them, you know, something to stand on. They understand who they are. Faith gives you identity. You know, I'm a child of God. And with that comes certainty. There's a lack of confusion and really strong direction. So faith, definitely family, you know. The boys are growing up. MJ, he's the oldest, he's 24 now. And man, he's a G unit, he's bigger than me, you know what I mean? He's autistic, he's verbal now. He's still selective in his language. If he doesn't like you, he won't talk to you, which I think is pretty cool. You know, and Elijah, our son, he's turned 18 last year in September, and he'll be going on a mission to Manchester, England on the 23rd of April in 2026. And he'll be there for 2 years. He'll serve God in a full-time capacity. He'll make serving God and the people of Manchester his only priority for 2 years. As a father, that's probably, you know, once you return to faith, your highest ambition is to raise a man of God. You know, and seeing that fulfilled is pretty cool. It's really cool. You know, and also my wife and I, we've been together since the 1900s. It's a long time. You know, but family matters. Family is what makes it all worthwhile. When it comes to finances, you know, like I said earlier, you know, one of the real flexes, if they're family men, all of them want to make their wives happy. But it becomes extremely rewarding. And for real men, that's a flex. Making your wives happy, giving them what they want, that's a flex. You know, but also I see it as a reward because my main go-to word was no. No, we can't afford that. No, because we're sacrificing, you know, rah. But it gets to a stage eventually where, you know, you flip the script. If you play things right, if you work hard, build yourself personally, you build yourself the character of a man, the competency and the capabilities of a man to become valuable either within your own business if you run a business. You also have a responsibility to, what do you do as a steward over those finances? Because it's if you just, I'm going to make her happy and give her everything she wants, and you do that too early, right? That doesn't last. That doesn't last. So you have to say no. You know, one of the things a husband has to say is, you know, sorry, we can't afford it. You know, no wife wants to hear that. You know, but the good ones, the good ones are up for it. They're up. They know they can't afford it. They're just asking you. They would love to have it. They're just trying to convey their desires. That's all it is. You know, and a good husband one day will make notes of those desires, and then she'll come home and you've surprised her with something that she really wanted. And that's fun, you know. Especially, like I said, we're heading towards the empty nester stage. The kids are at an age, like the way I see it from a family perspective, like my son Elijah, he lives my dream life. Like I wish I had that life when I was young. You know, and that's what your family gets when you're willing to sacrifice. And for me, speaking first person, you know, the real fulfillment now is creating experiences for my family and seeing those experiences through their eyes. The way that they respond to it, the way that they react, the face, like seeing a lot, like, you know, Elijah's like that cool teenager, you know what I mean? Everything's on the DL, man. He's like, oh yeah, it's all right, yeah. Oh, it was all right, Dad. But sometimes I just break through that and he's like, oh, you know, and yeah, and it just comes out. He's oh, you know, and, you know, making your family smile as a man is truly rewarding. You know, giving them experiences they didn't even know they wanted. But when they're out there, they're like, man, this is pretty lit. This is your NGL, baby, not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. This is it. You know, and being able to fulfill that and do those things. You know, that's the stuff that makes all of the sacrifice worthwhile, right? But you don't get there. Like, unless you're born into money, which most ain't, right? Most people aren't born into money. Most millionaires are self-made, right? And so when you're not born into money, you have to sacrifice to get to money. You have to sacrifice to build wealth. You have to say no to most things to be able to get the life that you want for the rest of your life, to be able to live the life of your dreams. And for me, the life of my dreams is seeing my family have amazing experiences, seeing my family content, seeing my family happy. Family really matters. Family's the driver. Family's where you cash in. You know, family's where you want to spend your time. You know, and yeah, they're probably the three most important things right now: faith, family, finances. Finance is just an enabler. Whether we like it or not, some people, money's evil, this. Bro, money is essential. I don't know if you've noticed. But everything costs money, right? Hopes, dreams, and expectations, most aren't free. Most are going to cost. There's a dollar sign attached to it. And so getting control of your finances early, learning to become valuable to yourself to be able to earn income, and then taking that income and putting it into assets, right? In our instance, it's property. We believe in property. We've seen property create wealth. We love property. Teaching families and families realizing that that's what they need to do with their finances unlocks the next phase. And that next phase is living the life of your dreams. And your children get to live the life of their dreams. No, they get to live the life of your dreams. And I didn't even know that was a thing. I had no idea that was a thing. Until one day I was like, man, I think the bro's living the life of my dreams. I wish I could do that when I was 18. And that's blessings, you know. So from a family perspective, we've got sayings in our house. You know, one is the Lord will provide. Like, we got to turn up. We've got to work our butts off and work hard and give, 150% and have the tenacity to keep going when everyone else folds. But make no mistake, the Lord will provide. Yeah, without the Lord's portion, you won't get to the top of the mountain.